Hello, everybody. Welcome to our IGDA Albany Professional Talk, Boomerang X Post-Mortem, delivered by Ben Calkins and Bones from Dang Studios. Welcome and thank you. I'm going to pass it off to y'all.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm Ben. On my screen, this is Bones.
Oh, you're the other way for me.
Oh, well, you're over there for me. But yeah, we are two members of Dang Studios. We have three others, Janice, Sam, and Perrin. And we just spent the last 2 years finishing a game called Boomerang X. And if you don't know, it's an arena shooter where the gimmick is your only weapon is a boomerang. And if you throw it, you can push a button and you'll slingshot to it. So you can basically use it to fly around. And you have these dogfighting type encounters with these gooey animal-like enemies. And it's a wave-based arena shooter. So you move from one arena to the next until the game is over. And yeah, it just came out 3 weeks ago, I think now.
Yeah, so as of today, 20 days ago. Also, I'd like to say thanks for having us.
Yeah,
we're happy to be here. I've always felt like everyone else had like industry expertise, and it's kind of, I mean, I don't want to claim to have expertise here, but it means a lot to me to be giving the talk instead of receiving the talk. So I'm really happy to be here. So thanks for having us. All right, you can go back to it.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit first about like what the conception of the game was and like where it started before we got to the point that we're at now. It was a really, really circuitous journey from conception to where we got it to completion a few weeks ago. It was originally a game jam game, like 90% of indie games, that me and one other person who is in Dang but isn't here right now, Sam, worked on. I think that must have been the summer after junior year when we were at RPI. And we were participating in the first Game's Toolkit Game Jam. And if you don't know, that's a YouTube channel hosted by a games video essayist. And the theme was dual purpose design. And I remember I was sitting in my bed talking with Sam on Discord, and we had been talking for so long at that point. We were at the point where we were just both lying down and being like saying whatever word came to our minds. And I think it was at some point I just said like, "Oh, a boomerang, that does two things. It goes away from you and it comes back to you." But then I had an actual idea, which is, "Oh, what if you go to the boomerang? You push a button and use it to the boomerang instead of the other way around." And we were like, "Okay, let's just go with that." And then we both went to sleep. But yeah, then we made it, and the thing we made is actually not that far from the final release version. I mean, it's much worse. It sucks, but it's in conception, it's pretty close. Like you have this four-sided yellow boomerang, and you're fighting these goo monsters in a naturalistic-looking arena. So we made that. Lost the game jam, but I think we were both still really enthusiastic about it. Skip ahead a few years. We've graduated. We've made a game studio. We ended up working on something other than Boomerang X for the 2 years. It was like the first year of college. We ended up working on something else. We ended up working on a game called Iowa Interloper, which we're also pretty proud of, and was also based on something that we'd done in college. And we were shopping around to publishers, and no one really wanted. Not that people didn't like it. It's that I think publishers looked at it and said it wouldn't sell well. It's a hacking simulator, so there's a lot of looking at text boxes and a lot of maneuvering windows around a screen. And I just think people looked at it and said this isn't something that's going to sell very easily. So we got almost universal no's, I think, from publishers. And I only say that because I remember if someone said yes or not, but I'm pretty sure it was a 100% no. And that must have been the start of the summer of 2019. And we just all said, sort of an agreement. Yeah, we don't want to do this project. Let's pivot to something else. And we ended up picking Boomerang X as a project to pick up to start doing again. Yeah, that turned out to be a really good decision. But yeah, I know, Bones, you have some things you want to say about what happened after we started development?
Well, you always have to worry, we had just been told that our previous game was not going to sell, so it was pretty pressing on my mind that we had to figure out a way to make sure that the game we're working on now was going to sell, because that's like an important thing if you want to make a game sustainably, because your game has to do well and sell. And so our plan for that was we were going to look for a publisher. And so I think so that was like May, June was when we actually started working on it full time, or most of us were working on it full time. And then in I want to say in September, we made a trailer. We spent almost a whole month making the trailer that we ended up releasing on like October 4th. I just remember that day. October 4th, and like we sent the trailer out to a bunch of people. And that was really like the best. I mean, that's the only way that we, I think, got a publisher, is because we made a trailer that we were really happy with and proud of, and like featured like what was cool about our game, like what was actiony about our game, and like what made it really cool. And we sent it to a bunch of publishers, and we heard back from some of them. We heard back from very few of them. I want to say out of like the 100 or more publishers we sent to, we actually heard back yes from like 3, and we got back a couple more no's than that. But one of the publishers that got back to us was Devolver, which was awesome. That was kind of like a dream come true for us. So, I think, entertained the idea of going with a different publisher than Devolver, but I don't think I wasn't serious about it. I knew that I think Devolver was the right choice for us, and especially the right choice for Boomerang X, given Devolver's history of action catalog. That just having Devolver's name on the game is going to sell more copies of the game than maybe as much marketing as we could have ever done on our own. That might still be true. But yeah, so I mean that's how we landed Devolver. It still is kind of crazy to me that we would like be published by Devolver, because like I grew up playing Devolver games. Those were like very formative for me. But yeah, I mean, we made a trailer that we were really happy with. We spent an entire month doing it, which like it took a long time. But I still think it was that trailer that is what won Devolver for us. I don't know won, but like that trailer is what got Devolver. And we also sent them, I think, an early build, which at the time, and the reason I say I think it was a trailer is because we sent the build as well, but I don't think the build was very good. I think it was like way too hard, and when we actually talked to them later, they were like, yeah, it was too hard. No one like on the team or studio actually beat it. Like it was really the trailer, I think, what did it. So my recommendation, or what it worked for us, I should say, is we had to make a trailer. We sent it to publishers, and we heard back from very few of them and got very lucky with Devolver. Working with Devolver has been great. I think we're transitioning to a new topic, I guess. Working with Devolver has been really great. They have handled so much stuff for us that we just haven't had to deal with. I mean, like marketing and like contacting like Twitch streamers and like getting press keys out and a ton of stuff like that they just have like a bunch of lovely people who do that, that we really never had to deal with, and like making sure that are helping us. I mean, they did all of our talks with Nintendo for like getting on the Switch. They are just going to have more leverage than we're going to have as you know, an indie team to get it onto the Nintendo Switch. That was one of the great things that having them as a publisher has done for us. And they put us in contact with the port team, which will go into detail on what it was like porting the game to Switch in great detail later. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of surreal. The all of our education about publishers was mostly coming from a talk that Nigel did about, or called, "You Don't Need a Fucking Publisher," is what the thing is called.
It should say Nigel Lowry is someone from Devolver Digital.
Yeah, the actual person at Devolver. CMO. Yeah, so the person at Devolver who we were talking to about like making a publishing deal, the person we were in contact with was also the person whose advice we were taking for like going into those conversations, which was pretty funny. But I mean, most of the talk was about, you know, this is what a good publisher should do for you, and you know, those are things that he's obviously going to do with the publishing team that he runs. So yeah. Anyway, thumbs up about Devolver. I don't know if that surprises anyone. They have a pretty long track record. Do you want to talk about
now Bones?
Oh yeah.
Do you want to talk to? I was actually going to say, I know we said we would talk about this before after this, but there's one other thing I kind of want to talk about, which is how heavily the timeline for Boomerang X got modified, and how frequently it was completely disregarded. Originally going to be a 3-month project, and then a 6-month project, and then a year into it, we decided to add basically another year to the development timeline because we realized it was too short, and apparently the game is still too short, according to some people in the Steam reviews, but we'll ignore them. I think it's just the right length. And I really think highlighted the importance to me of just not thinking the game is supposed to be whatever it was when you first conceived of it, because it is really, like, I don't think there's a shot in the trailer that actually is present in the game anymore. Like, those levels don't, if they're in the game, they don't look like that anymore. Pretty much everything from that to the end version changed completely. And it was really hard. That was a hard decision to say we basically want to double the length of from 1 to 2 years, because we were when we were making that decision, we thought we were getting closer to the end, and then we basically said, actually, I guess what it is you have an overarching goal in mind, which is you want the player to experience it this way. We wanted the player to get to a certain place by the time that they were done with the game. We wanted them to have a certain comfort with the skills and the abilities of the game, to be at a certain place where they looked and felt like the badass that we wanted them to be. And we just realized that we had not afforded enough time in our game to allow people to get that good at it. So we basically just said, I have to double the length of the game in order to actually give people the time and the breathing room to get that good at it.
Yeah, and
we did it.
I think our pacing is pretty quick for how quickly you get upgrades, and the reason for that is because originally we were just going to give you an upgrade after every level, and now we give you an upgrade basically almost roughly every other level, because we just put another level in between all of those. A lot of our like level conceptions were like, we want to give you like a small a small arena before the main arena that we're giving you your upgrade for, so that you can like have some practice time with it. But I mean, that only is reflected at this point in like the like code side and naming conventions for the level, like in editor. All of them are like actual real levels now. There aren't any like small precursor levels. They're just all full levels. Oh, there's so many delusions.
Project it's like a disaster.
Oh my god, it's so ugly.
The naming conventions are all over the place. It's a complete disaster.
Yeah. But
like the levels are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and because we added them, it had to be like 1_0, 2_0.
Right, and so the
It's
one
kind of
underscore
funny.
0 comes before like level 1. It was really bad.
Yeah.
Ugh. We should have just renamed it then.
We probably should have.
Whatever. I mean, it is what it is.
It came out.
It came out, and it's our I guess this is a great segue into reception and how launch went.
Oh wait, should we talk about the Switch port before we do
No,
that?
you're right. We should talk about Switch port because the game. Okay.
It's an important thing.
It's important.
The Switch port process. Like, if you look at the whole timeline, it's a relatively small fraction of the timeline, but it was by far the most. It was the most stressful for me. I can say. I can definitely say that when we were porting for it was
busiest.
Yeah,
it was nuts. That whole like 3-month period.
Sam was the other program was having a time.
We were all having our own.
This makes it sound like it's bad to have your game on Switch, but it's actually awesome. If you know from the beginning of your development cycle that you wanted to be on Switch, which we did not, we were 18 months in before we were like, all right, it's time to put it on Switch. And Devolver got us in touch with the port team, which, thank God, we would not have been, we couldn't have done anything on our own without a port team. And the port team looked at the build and they were like, yeah, it runs at about 2 frames a second right now on Switch. And it was like, well, how bad is it? They're like, you need to do a 90% poly count reduction on some of these areas, maybe a 50% reduction in other areas. And that is after 18 months to then here you have to go back and do the whole thing again and make it look worse. It was a hard thing that was a hard pill to swallow. But we also knew Devolver had done a good job of communicating that if you put this game on Switch, it could potentially double your sales. Just because there's not as much competition from other indie games on Switch. And that's because it's really hard to make games for Switch, apparently. But yeah, it was, our game before, or bump maps. No bump maps, almost no textures. Everything, all the details coming from geometry for the most part. And one of the things we realized is we're going to have to start replacing some of the assets with something that our pipeline had never been built to accommodate, which was bump maps and texture maps. So Janice, our 2D artist, spent weeks drawing these bump maps out and swapping them into existing assets. And me and one of the team artists and Perrin spent a long time doing geometry decimation on the existing assets. And this one was something that only that I got to deal with on my own, but I found out that there's a 15 voice limitation on the number of audio sources you can have playing simultaneously on Switch, so you can't have more than 15 sounds. We had 260 playing at the worst place in our game. I literally could not believe. I was like, "You are joking! You've got to be joking when you say 15. Are you? That is an insane number. Half-Life 2 is going to run 60. That game came out in 2004, and it turned out that they were right, because I reached out to someone from our audio plugin team, the developer of our audio plugin, Wise, and he was like, "Yeah, it's 15. That sounds right." So I spent weeks trying to figure out how to get the voice limitations set up in Wise, which is the audio plugin we use. But somehow it is under 15, which is nice.
Yeah, I remember that time. You stopped coming into the office, and we just didn't see you for 2 or 3 weeks, and then you came back, and you're like, "All right, we have 15 voice sources now on Switch." It was we didn't see you, we didn't hear from you. You're gone for 3 weeks, and you came back, and we're like, "Huh, I wonder how Ben's doing." And you came back, and you're like, "All right, 15 audio sources on Switch. It's done."
I remember I can't remember what his name is. The guy from the port team, Kenny. I think it was Kenny. Kenny told us on Friday it has to be 15 voices, and I spent the weekend trying to rationalize why that was untrue. And then I was just going through the build and being like, "Is it even possible?" And on Monday I was like, "Okay, I guess I can do it." Yeah, I have no choice. I have to.
The first phase is denial. The second phase is acceptance.
Exactly.
So we had to completely decimate our try count or our poly count by 90%, and basically everyone in the game. There was also I never had to deal with this either, but I remember like seeing the damage that it did to our geometry. But all of our levels are, they're like more or less circles. I know that's not true, but like they're like circles, like cylinders, and so you can't see like the backside of all the geometry on the circle, right? Like on the edge, the back edge, back face. Back face culling is expensive. Your computer is really good at doing it, but the Switch is not as good as doing it. And so Sam made a tool that like batched pieces of geometry together and let you delete individual faces from the back side, and then recombine those into geometry assets so that we could also just delete extra faces from around the back, which was an arduous human process that Ben, Perrin, and Janice did. And after they did that on every level, literally every level and area in the game, including non-combat arenas and stuff, we spent the rest of development like looking at all the walls at all the different angles and just finding holes that were accidentally got extra deleted, because it was, that it was done by hand, and you can't be perfect. And so we were like plugging holes in geometry for the rest of development after that happened. But game's on Switch, so there's also more stuff about Switch on a code side. So, I mean, they're obviously better experts than I am on this, but my general top abstract level understanding of like optimizing programming is when you want to optimize for performance, you generally, take up a lot of memory so that you have all the information already stored and you don't have to do any computation at runtime. So either you're doing runtime computation or memory computation, or runtime optimization, or you're optimizing for memory. And you're like, I don't have a lot of memory, but I can, maybe take a little extra time at runtime. On the Switch, you kind of like couldn't do either of those things. So it was like, okay, well, this way you've been programming, optimizing for runtime, just take up a bunch of extra memory. Kenny was like, we can't take up that much memory because like it starts to impact performance like almost just as much as it would having it at runtime to just take up that much memory on Switch. So we had to do a bunch of stuff with that. Man, what a mess. So we had to do a bunch of just like every possible optimization we could think of. And then, the port team, Kenny coming behind us and being like, yeah, I can take this even further. Great, do your thing. Someone else having different variable naming conventions that we did. It's a different problem, but, swallowed that too. And then there was like AI problems. I mean, like, 3D pathfinding for enemies is a kind of nightmare, and that was one of the things that we had to do basically over and over and over again was I would just rewrite enemy AI over and over and over and over again. Like, I think the squids, which is what we call them, the first flying enemy that you see in the game, I think I wrote them like over 7 times, just like almost from scratch rewrite. Which is just what happens. Like this is kind of what game dev is really, is having to redo work, be like, you know what, this like isn't really doing it, like they should be more fun, or like they're clumped up too close together and like they're just being like this fodder for all your powers, which is kind of a unique part of what our game was. Is so we had to like rewrite enemy AI so that they wouldn't like cluster together. They would like stay spread apart, instead of just directly following the player all the time. So I don't know, we had to do a lot of stuff with that. There are enemies in our game that like we basically didn't write AI for. And the reason we did it is because we just didn't have the performance like possibility on Switch. We call them worms. They're only deadly when there's a ton of them in the level. And what they do is they start pulling together and then they make little explosions and like blast apart. And so all that AI to like, well, who's close to me and all that stuff, you know, you can only do so much. And, you know, their base behavior is just like, I'm going to go in the direction of the player. I'm not even going to look if there are obstacles in the way, because we just couldn't afford it. And especially as the time those enemies were getting finalized was around when we were getting told like, hey, you know, it runs at 2 frames per second on Switch. So yeah, we had to come up with like creative solutions for that, and I think one of those is the enemy highlight indicator. So there's a feature in the game where you only have to kill required enemies on a wave for the wave to be over, which was a pretty early change. But we took that even further to where once it gets down to like 3 required enemies left, it got annoying to chase the enemies down, which was the problem that the required enemies are supposed to be solving, that you don't have to chase down every enemy. But now you're having to chase down required enemies, and now we have these worms that are sometimes required that don't have any pathfinding that will just try to go right into a wall endlessly, and you'll never know where they are. And so we came up with basically what is like wall hacks. You can see their outline through a wall if they're like some of the last required enemies left, which, because we were putting that in, became an accessibility feature called extra visible required enemies, where they always have that glowing highlight, which was great. I mean, it's my preferred way to play the game, actually. But yeah. So yeah, we had to come up with a solution for like why our enemies like couldn't be smart enough to not get stuck, which was like an interesting problem, because before we were like doing Switch stuff, we were like, okay, we'll just write AI for that, making them not get stuck. And then it was like, okay, well, we actually we don't have the bandwidth to do that, and so we had to come up with more solutions to the problem that we were having. So yeah, that's why worms get stuck. I've seen a lot of complaints about it, actually, which surprises me. I would expect people to complain about it a lot, given how much people complained about it to me on the team. Just saying. Just saying.
Oh no, I'll own that. I complained about it quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, people's biggest complaint with the game is that it's too short.
Yeah, are we moving on to post-launch territory now?
Do you want to talk about more Switch stuff? No.
It's not a trauma I want to revisit.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. So, right. People's biggest complaint with the game is that it's short, which like it was gonna be shorter, right? Like we quadrupled the length of our original estimate on the game to make it this long, right? But and another thing is like the reason it's short is because every time we revisited difficulty in the game, we made it easier and easier and easier, so that like, because we just wanted to be accessible. We didn't want people to like, you know, like. We could have made the game longer if we made it so hard that you would die multiple times on your first playthrough, right? Like on each level. Like, you know, when you get to level 2, you die twice before you beat it. When you get to level 3, you die 3 times before you beat it. Like, we could have made the game so hard that it would have been longer. But we believed that that would make the game worse. That would make the game less accessible, and that less people would enjoy it. And so the game is the length that it is. On a mouse, it will take you between an hour and 2 hours to actually play through it, like the base experience from a blank save. On controller, it might take you a little longer just because it's first-person aiming game. Even with as many options as we have. Oh, we could also talk about how we had to completely rechange difficulty for Switch.
Oh yeah. There was that too. There was that whole other thing where
yeah.
Well, it was a technical reason and a aesthetic one for it. we have a New Game Plus mode in our game, and there are about 6,000 times as many enemies in New Game Plus as there are on the base game. And even with all of our optimizations for geometry passes, the New Game Plus as it is on PC just was not going to run on Switch at all. So we basically had to remake the waves for New Game Plus on Switch. And on top of that, now that was the technical problem. The aesthetic one was then having something that was of a manageable difficulty for the Switch's control scheme. And the base game was not that. It really was not. So
Yeah.
We actually didn't have to make too many changes to anything about the way levels were paced or the arc of the waves for altering the difficulty, but we did make some changes with regards to enemy speeds or how long you can slow down time with one of the abilities you have before throwing a shot.
And you also slow down
a ton of lock-on, like, wait, what?
Well, there are two big time slow changes. You get more time with it, but it also slows time down more. So original or balance for mouse difficulty is 20%. Balance for controller difficulty is 10%. Time slow, which is huge. I mean, we kind of knew that we were like, this is like kind of too hard, like on a controller. Like, are people ever going to want to play it with a controller? And then, like, we're putting it on Switch as our other major platform, right? And so, like, we're kind of worried about that. And then Devolver got their hands on like a build on it, and they instantly set a meeting up with us, and they're like, "This is too hard. You'll have to fix this." And we were like, "Yeah, that's true. We'll get on it." And so, yeah, we made a lot of these changes, which, yeah, as Ben was saying, it's like enemy speeds, like rotation of enemies. Like, we have a lot of enemies that rotate to try and like face their weak spots away from you. And so we just made them rotate slower, so that you don't have to be as quick to like get behind them, time slow, aim, and land up your shot. And it was like, it's a pretty sweeping combination of changes, but it was fortunate that it didn't actually have a ton of like necessary. We didn't have to change a lot. We just had to change a couple of variables for like speeds and like constants. Basically, we just had to change a bunch of constants, which was nice. I don't know. And we also have, I think you're about to get to this, like separate NG Plus waves for Switch, which is just...
We do have a separate one for Switch. That was one of the things I was worried that people would notice, and like the Twitter angry mob would like firebomb us, but it turns out no one cares, which is awesome. They just play the game and they enjoy it. Yeah, it had to be all redone on Switch for New Game Plus, just because the existing configuration on PC was completely not performant on Switch.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was sort of balanced by the fact that even if we have the number of enemies in the New Game Plus waves on Switch, the control configuration sort of augments the difficulty on its own anyway, so it kind of balances out like that, I think. That is not the same on Switch as it is on PC. And I not just the way it looks, but I guess the way it plays too.
Yeah. Which, like, we were kind of torn on that, like, as a principle. Like, do we really want to put out a different game for Switch and PC? And the answer is yes, of course. They're different platforms and they have different needs. Especially like a first-person shooter game is I mean, that's what our game is at heart. That's what we get compared to, I think rightfully so, to a lot of like quick-paced action, like retro shooter type games. And like, it's hard to do those things, that like precise aiming and quick movement with a controller. It just is. So that's we did make a different game. I mean, it's not that different, but we made, we changed some stuff for Switch, and it's different. And I don't even know if it's like nobody complains. I think it's just that no one will notice. because like
Yeah.
when I watch someone play, I can tell immediately. But like I'm in the game and I know what to look for. And I don't think a lot of people notice. It was actually like people couldn't tell so badly they had to ask me what that setting did for speedrunning because they were like, well, we need to like make speedrunning rules. Like, what does balanced for controller mean? What does that do? I was like, it does a lot of stuff, but we're about to do a patch and we'll just make it blue or something, the timer, so you'll know. So we did a couple like little tweaks like that. So our speedrun timer is very decorated. To just make it clear what settings people may or may not have on. I guess that's another thing that we knew pretty early on is like we knew that it was going to be a popular speedrunning game. Sam and I used to joke in college about making a game that was like AGDQ bait. And I think we did not mean to do it. We really, truthfully did not mean to do it, but we have. Boomerang X is GDQ bait, which is just very funny to have actually like willed that into existence from a joke that we made years ago. But it's like the reception is great. Everyone who plays the game loves it. Speedrunners are loving playing it. We have people beating the game very quickly, people beating the game way faster than I can. Okay, people beating the game a little faster than I can. Let's say that.
They're getting pretty fast, Bones. They're getting pretty fast over there.
Well, no one has beaten my New Game Plus record, as far as I know. So,
all right.
Open challenge to everyone out there. Go beat my New Game Plus time. It's on speedrun.com or whatever website is for speedrunning. Yeah, so everyone who played the game was great. Press was very positive reception of the game. Our Steam reviews, a very positive reception of the game. And our player base and the people who join our Discord really love the game, and our speedrunners really love the game. But we just didn't get it. It hasn't been in enough hands yet. So it's like reviews have been great, but we wanted it to sell better than it did by now, for sure. But like opening weekend especially. I don't know what you have to say about this, Ben.
I think everyone in this chat who hasn't bought the game should buy it.
Oh, yeah.
No, what Bones said is true. Like it did. I mean, I know I was prepared for it to underperform, and so I wasn't shocked by the day one and the week one figures. Obviously, it's disappointing when you feel like it's not meeting some quota that you had set it to, or you had an idea for what it was going to do when it comes out. But I mean, just the fact alone that the people who do play it really like it has been very important. No one has played the game and said this. Actually, that's not true. Some people played and say this sucks, but I can't say no one's played and said this doesn't suck, because everything that has ever been made has had some guy read the complete works of Shakespeare and was like, none of those were good. Those were all bad. And there are definitely people who play Boomerang X and go from start to finish, absolute garbage. But a lot of people, most people really like it. And there are people who really, really like it. And the fact that there's anyone speedrunning the game at all is honestly kind of enough for me. That they are so dedicated to it that they're going to get that game down to sub 20 minutes if it kills them. I'm so excited to see them do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as trying to get it into more people's hands, because the livelihood of the game kind of depends. It does depend on that. And so then that depends on what our post-release strategy is. And it's sort of been altering based on our observation of the game's financial performance. We originally were pitching around the idea of some kind of significant paid DLC that could be done like 6 months down the line. But as time went on, we were corresponding with Devolver about this, and so they were of the thinking that paid DLC would not be a great idea right now, because paid DLC requires you to have a larger volume of people playing it in order for it to be cost effective, because
Only a
about
small
10%,
percentage.
or maybe even
Yeah.
less, maybe it was less than that even, of your player base is actually going to buy that DLC. And so now we're talking about things that we're actively doing that we're still in the midst of doing, working on like a free update, something we can launch in October. That
Wait.
would not be so significant that it feels like something you have to pay for, but something that would be meaningful enough that people who maybe were not interested before would take interest now.
Yeah. Obviously we've done our first patch already, which was mostly speedrunners weren't crazy about the exact intricacies of the speedrun in-game timer. So I know I said that sarcastically, but it was very easy to make those changes for them. So we updated the speedrun timer a bit. We fixed some bugs and stuff. Probably made the final like tweaks to enemy difficulty that we will maybe ever make. I know that's like a curse that I've just uttered out loud. But yeah, so this update is not going to be a patch. I don't know how much we can really talk about it, but I think our plan is we want to come out with some semblance of like a free thing that you can play that like just playing, and this is our experience with the demo that we have. That's on Steam. We made it for the Steam Demo Festival back in February. Everyone who played the demo loved it and was like, "Oh my god, this is great! I'm telling all my friends about it, etc." Like we, just needed people to get their hands on the game, because once they did, they would like love it, right? And so that's what we're trying to do here. Endless Wave mode. Endless mode has been like the most suggested thing, and we were like, yeah, we obviously thought about that. Well, it's not obvious to some people, but I think everyone who makes games understand that, you do actually think of everything you could do, and you just have to decide what you're actually going to do. Endless Wave was, perhaps incorrectly, we did New Game Plus instead. It's possible that Endless Wave would have helped the game do better, but I think that the Endless Wave mode that we're working on now is cooler than a version of Endless Wave mode that we would have made with the game's release. So I personally am like really excited, because it's like, you get to design again. It's been a long time. We've been in like polish and bug fixing and like rewrite mode for such a long time. It's really exciting to be back in the designer's chair and you just get to play around and like, oh, what if we did this? What if enemies gave you a score? Like, what does it mean to get a high score in Boomerang X, like in an endless mode? So we're getting to answer those questions and design around that stuff, which has been really exciting, which we've only just been doing like this week. Maybe I'll have a different story to tell next week. But
on day 2 of actually trying this stuff out.
Like actually day 2.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where we are now. We're working on what's probably going to be like a separate free like game. Not even game, but like an app that's going to be like alongside the game on the Steam page, that like anyone for like the whole or a certain amount of time is going to be able to just hop on, play for free once it's downloaded, right? And just like really get into, and then maybe after a certain amount of time, we'll be like, all right, if you want to keep doing this, you gotta get the game. And so that's kind of like, people have done all types of game release strategies before, but this is what we're planning on now. And the reasons I think I've already explained is why we're doing it now. Is we need people to we need people to put the boomerang in their hands, because once they do, and once they teleport for the first time, I think it really starts to starts to click for people and they really start to love our game as much as we do, which is always great to see. Ben, do you have a prettier way to wrap up our talk before we start taking questions, or
the end? No, I got nothing.
All right.
I think we covered it pretty thoroughly.
Yeah,
we covered it from start to the present day. Yeah.
So,
but yeah, now I think we're turning it over to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Yeah, question mode. Okay. I have this is from Mark. I have a question. When there's a QA portion, how did Devolver react to the development timeline extending 3 months, eventually up to 2 years? Did that cause any issues for you? Our team is planning to pitch to publishers soon, and that is a possibility we're aware of. I think we had made this extension decision before we had contacted Devolver, but we definitely changed our timeline with Devolver several times, right?
I do remember the decision to add the significant extension. That was after we signed with Devolver, because I remember we had to talk to them and basically say, is it cool to do this? The funny thing is that extension was actually proposed by another publisher that we've been talking to that we didn't end up saying yes to. We were like, we don't want to work with you. You want us to work even longer on this thing? And then a few months later, we're like, actually, they were kind of right. We do have to work longer on this thing, but we're with someone else now, so it's not as embarrassing. But yeah, Devolver was just like, yeah, do whatever you got to do to make it whatever you think it's got to be. Which was kind of their attitude from the beginning to now, but seems to always have just been their attitude about it.
Devolver placed a lot of faith in our ability and competency as developers, which, arguably misplaced. But that's their choice, right? So basically every time we were like, hey, this is what we've been thinking. Do y'all think it's a good idea? And they would say, absolutely. They would always gas us up. We could always come to them for support.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, yeah, not to just Devolver is they are pretty great. They say their mission statement is we only sign people who we're actually going to trust to do good work, and we're not going to get in their way. And to their full credit, that is exactly what they did. They signed with us, and they put their complete trust in us to make the kinds of decisions to make the thing that we wanted to make. And not once did they ever say any kind of creative decision was bad. Except for the part where the game was too hard on Switch, and they were like, absolutely not. That was the one thing I think that they were pretty firm about, which was good because they were completely right. But otherwise, no. They it's like they said, we want to empower developers to make games, and we want to do a good job of making sure that other people see those games.
The way it always seemed to me was like we would be talking about something for a week, and we were like, I don't know, like, should we really do this? Like, the game is definitely too hard, but can we really afford to make the changes to difficulty, right? Like, what does that even look like? We hadn't even considered difficulty settings in the game. And then, we were talking about that, and then Devolver was like, hey, we need to have a conversation about the difficulty on Switch. And we're like, oh, really? And so then we would have the conversation with them, and they would say, it's too hard, you need to do something. And that would be like, sometimes to be crass, it was like the kick in the ass that we needed to like actually implement the changes that we knew that would make the game better, but just weren't sure if we were going to be able to time-wise. But they told us, no, you need to do that. Which was, that was really the only time that they came to us with a hard line. But
yeah,
it was kind of a hard line that we needed at the time. Not to, I don't know.
Just getting back to getting back to the question where you say that caused any issues. Well, remember is that this was after we had signed. It wasn't part of the pitch. But I will say this: if you're going into a pitch thinking you're going to be augmenting your timeline later on, I would just assume that it's going to take the longest amount of time you think it's going to take, and not say this is how long we think we can get it done in, but it may actually take this long because, I mean, we've only made one final commercial release, but we found out that it took significantly longer than our longest estimation was. So whatever you think your longest estimate is what I would run with in a pitch.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to be, I mean, you know this, but you don't want to be in a publisher pitch being like, it might take this long, it might take this long, we might need this much, we might need this much, right? You want to have a firm answer for them, is my other advice. Not necessarily that that'll be helpful.
And I mean, that's true. That is true. Like, that's completely true. I think the only reason we were able to get away with it is because it is Devolver, and they had like published Fall Guys relatively recently. I don't know if you know this, but Fall Guys did really well, and it gets Devolver a lot of leverage to kind of just take risks and do more of what they want to do.
Yeah.
Which comes down to us. It means that we are given more freedom to do what we want to do, and that's not always going to be the case with a lot of other publishers, I think. Smaller publishers.
Yeah. We have another question from Jeremy. Will it come to other consoles? We don't have any plans at the moment. So it's just PC and Switch. On PC, I think we just went live on the Epic Game Store. The game was released on Steam on the 8th, but it took a while to get some of the other storefronts in there. I think most of them should be up by now. Yeah.
There's one, I mean, maybe I'm assuming where the question comes from, but we see this question a lot on like Twitter, like, is it going to come out on Xbox and PlayStation? I think that most people who ask that question should know that like every developer wants as many people as possible to play their game. Like, I would love this thing to come out on the Atari 2600 if I thought more people would play it, because it does.
Right. We did not forget
there are many factors
that existed, right?
No, we did not.
We know that the Xbox exists. We know PlayStation exists. We thought about putting it on there, and we've had to make the decisions that we made. It wasn't by accident. I don't know.
Oh, okay. We're allowed to say this. PlayStation and Xbox said no to us. They turned us down. They said, no, we don't think this is going to do well. We don't think it's worth it to go through. I don't even know what kind of processes they go through, because we didn't get that far through the door to actually start whatever cert they have. But to all the people on Twitter saying why it's not there, they don't want us. That's just how it goes. I know that no one from the Twitter rabble is here right now, but if they were, I just would like them to know that every developer wants as many people as possible to play their game. And sometimes just that things don't work out, and it's on Switch and PC, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we're just complaining about like people who complain. I guess,
yeah, we're just whining.
But like, people make suggestions, and it's like they act like we've never even thought of it, and it's like, what do you mean? Or you think we're stupid? Like, of course we thought about it. Like, I can't believe there's not an endless wave mode in the game. Really? You think we didn't think about it? I don't know. Like, we made a choice. It's like, sometimes people complain about, like, we made like 10,000 micro decisions all the way along the development process, right? Like, for example, we wanted the ability to swap between two of your power-ups. So the scatter shot and the needle. We wanted the ability to swap between the two of them. And so we were like, okay, well, we have room for 2 buttons for this. Do we want to have a use button and a swap button? Or do we want each of those to be on a different button? And we went for use button and swap button. And then someone like made a comment like, whoever came up with this decision should be fired. It's like, I'm sorry, man. Jeez. Come on.
That was my decision, by the way.
Yeah.
I think I fought for that.
You fought for that really hard.
No, I'm
totally fine with it. I'm totally fine with it now. I'm used to it, and I think it's cool to like, in time slow while you're like lining up shot to like quickly swap and use it. It feels awesome to do. So I'm fully on board with it after we implemented it. But like that was like a really long argument we had. We argued about that on what to do for that for like a week, way longer than this decision.
Yeah, we should have just asked Twitter to figure it out for us.
Exactly.
Time. Just have that guy on Twitter tell us exactly what we were supposed to do.
Yeah, game dev by a Twitch does game dev. Exactly.
Mm.
All right, so
we
have
more
some
questions coming in, by the way.
Yeah.
Were there any technical hurdles with development? Many. There were several technical hurdles with development. Yeah, actually, you know what? Let's backtrack on that. It went perfectly fine.
We had to update a couple times.
I mean, literally every time you make something in a game, it is a technical hurdle. Every time something starts working, it feels like magic has happened to make it get there. Like I don't even know where to begin with that. Like every time you add something, it's broken the first time, and when you fix it, you have overcome a technical hurdle. I mean, the biggest one was probably Switch. The Switch port was definitely the biggest technical hurdle.
Yeah, was it a technical hurdle to make it so there are only 15 active voices at one time on the Switch?
Yes.
Or was that easy?
Yes, that was a technical hurdle. No, not easy. That was a technical hurdle. The final boss. That was probably, as far, like, the Switch port was one thing, but that wasn't like us trying to make something new. The biggest, the most technically challenging feature in the game is definitely the last boss.
Yeah.
Which, if you don't know, it's basically a 3D version of the snake from Snake, where it just fills up this space, and like wherever its head goes, the rest of its body will trail along, but it's in 3 dimensions. And making it like Sam was, I don't even know how hard the logic was to make, because Sam had to do all that on his own, and from what I could tell from his face, it seemed to be really hard. It seemed to be giving him a really hard time.
Very difficult to do.
He looked really happy. He looked really happy while he was doing it. And I can tell you from the art side, man, that was a really tough one. That was a really tough one for a lot of reasons that I don't even know if it's even worth getting into because they're so esoteric. It was just really big. It was just a really big technical challenge.
We wanted to have, like, one of our original aesthetic goals for it was, like, the final wave, all of its skin would have been peeled off, and you would just only be fighting the skeleton version of it. But it kind of looked like shit when we, like, actually got it in there. So...
Yeah, I guess so.
And so now what happens is when the lightning strikes in that cloud and the final level, the skeleton that we had modeled and rigged to, follow everything flashes in the lightning. And so you can like see the bones of this eel as you are fighting it. And it looks incredibly cool. But that would not have even been a thought if we hadn't already done it already.
And had made the whole skeleton for another reason.
That would not be in the game if we hadn't already made the skeleton for a completely different reason, really.
Just because that feature alone would not have seemed like enough justification for the amount of work it took to basically make the same enemy. I mean, making a skeleton of something is actually more complicated because there's just more surface area being covered because things are wrapping around inside.
Yeah.
Janice spent a long time on that skeleton, so I'm really glad that it found a way into the game in a really cool way. Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry if it seemed like we were making fun of your question about were there any technical hurdles.
No, I mean it is an interesting thing to think about. Like, what is the feature in the game that was the most technically challenging?
There was a enemy. There was gonna be a second boss enemy that was gonna be in the room before. So, which is what is called the Resonance Engine. I worked for about a month and a half on this, basically tentacle monster. And it was, just too much. And we need all hands on deck to meet these actual guidelines, and it got cut, it got cut. And I mean, that was a huge relief for me because, oh my God, it was causing me so much stress and work. And like, I was sad because, like, I don't know, would our game be cooler if it had this epic tentacle monster? Of course. But, like, you know, what else? What would that have cost us everywhere else in the game? You know, like, what would have been missing?
Yeah.
Without like extra eyes on polish and stuff. And like, you know, would the game have come out later? Like all that stuff. So, I mean, that was a technical problem that was ultimately deemed too much work for the time we had. So,
Yeah.
future problems, if we ever make a tentacle monster in a game, we'll allocate more time to it, I guess. Not even that it
Jamie is
was
asking, as a small team, how are you balancing?
Yeah.
What?
No, sorry, I was just going on.
Yeah, we have several other questions. As a small team from Jamie, how are you balancing post-launch development work on Boomerang X with pre-production and pitching work for future projects? Well, we're honestly still, I'd say, just focusing on Boomerang X right now. I mean, we're talking about what it is that we're going to be doing next, but not actually really starting the work on doing that. We're still just talking about, in a tangible way, Boomerang X stuff, and all of the actual work for producing stuff is just being put to Boomerang X.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say that like Sam and I are our programmers, and so Sam and I have been busy, like in the office every day, working the full day every day, and there's just not as much demand for like in the actual game itself for like art at the moment because like you know art's pretty done. And most of it is like
Yeah, I'm eating
bugs.
chocolate and sipping martinis while they work.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, a little bit.
Yeah, and like you know, truthfully, I'm happy that you don't have to work. Like if you imagine if you had to work, I think we'd be in a worse place. But now that we're working on post-release stuff, you know, we're bringing back in, you know, Janice into the concept art pipeline, and like we're having them mock some stuff up. Also, they're working on Steam trading cards right now, which is like a whole thing that I think this is another thing that Devolver was like, "You want to do this?" In a meeting earlier this week, and we were like, "What are those?" And so they told us what they were. And so yeah, Janice is hard at work with that. Do you want to talk about anything else about that, Ben?
There's one other thing I wanted to say, which is like, I mean, one of the things we are starting to talk about, it's like too early to say anything definitively, but we're talking about branching to like non-game projects. I mean, that's probably all I think I'm comfortable saying right now, just because we haven't committed to anything. But as far as like pre-production goes, like we're opening ourselves up to conceiving of things that branch into other media.
Yeah. We still want to make games as well.
Yeah.
But we're just, I don't know. We're in talks. We're talking about it.
We're in like we're in a deep primordial ooze of hopefully some cool new things right now, I'd say.
Yeah.
Is your team fully remote, and what's one thing that worked really well for you during this time? We were remote for a long time during quarantine, but we actually do rent an office out of the Troy Innovation Garage, which we have moved back into. But I mean, yeah, for the last like the last 9 months of development, it was mostly remote work, I'd say. Maybe even more than that. Maybe even 10, 11 months of development, we were just working fully remotely. Sometimes I would go to the office just by myself. But yeah, other than that, we were only meeting through Discord and sharing files over, like sharing shots over Telegram, and we were working. We were remotely out of necessity. And I don't know if you have any else to add to that.
Yeah, so I think what I attribute to the like big success of that, why we were actually able to make that work, because it still is kind of shocking to me that we actually didn't fall behind schedule despite working remote, which is crazy, right? How is that possible? But we met every morning. We kept our work times, and we kept each other to those work times because every morning we had a morning meeting at 10 a.m. Um, and it would usually last for 15 minutes, and sometimes it would last for an hour. Um, and it's nice to like just be able to talk to people, which is kind of cool. Like a thing about working remote is like we couldn't really get out a whole lot. So first of all, it was nice to have human contact, and second of all, talking about like this is what we did yesterday, this is what I'm doing today. Like stand-ups, I think became a thing for a reason. And we weren't actually standing up, but you know, we did do them every morning. So I think that is why it was really able to work for us, is because we kept like the same amount of meeting basically. So
There's a second part to this question too, which is what worked really well for you during this time.
that was what I was
What
answering.
worked really? Yeah.
Unless you think,
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm glad you said that because I was like, was it enhanced? Was my personal experience enhanced by working remotely? Uh, I don't know. Working remotely, I'm sure everyone now has a lot of thoughts about what it's like to work remotely. Um, Maybe I don't have to add to that discourse anymore.
yeah.
Bones, I think you did a good job of answering that.
What's new? Okay.
Lol, I
are
have
the
it
big
on Switch,
differences?
but interested in getting it on PC. What are the differences? Well, it's capped at 30 on Switch for one. Just necessity. Not on PC. Visually, 1080p on PC and it's locked to 720 and undocked on Switch. I mean, it does play pretty slowly. Like, if you play it on the comparable modes on PC and Switch, you can have the same experience, but obviously we threw a bunch of features into Switch to make it much more palatable.
Yeah.
If you're playing it on Switch, if you get it on Switch, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, if you want to play the difficulty that is default on PC on the Switch, you can change it to hard mode, which is basically what that difficulty does. So on PC, it's called balance for mouse and balance for controller. On Switch, it's easy and hard. So that's what. Yeah. I mean, first of all, you can't say like mouse on Switch. That's one of the like weird. I don't know if it's even weird, but like that's just one of the things that we wouldn't have never known without a port team. They told us like, yeah, you actually can't say mouse on Switch. But yeah, so on Switch it defaults to normal, normal mode, which is what we designed for the Switch and controllers. And on PC it defaults to mouse. We're getting some new localization for like extra screens that will make it more clear that we have a balance for controller mode when you're on the computer. Um, on the computer, on PC. So like, when you start a new save file, it'll say like, do you want to play on balance for mouse or balance for controller? And like, I think people will appreciate that because, I watched people on Twitch play with a controller with balance for mouse difficulty, and I was like, oh yeah, this is why we made a difficulty setting for this. So a lot of people get frustrated. So hoping to ease some of that frustration. Yeah. Next question is, do we create game design documents?
Wait, what about this question? This is what if I'm in love with Tepin? I want to answer that question. Ask them out on a date. You never know.
Date. Go make fan art where you are kissing, etc. That's what fan art is for. Is so you can kiss the characters that you can't kiss in the video game.
Yeah, and Tepin's got a lot of love to give. I think Tepin's single. That's my interpretation of the canon of Boomerang X.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think Tepin is... whatever. I don't know the... I know, I'm sure I should know the Boomerang X lore, but I kind of don't.
Yeah.
So...
I'm sorry I had to do that. But the next question is actually, it is a good question about, do we create design documents? Sometimes. Sometimes we create design documents.
I don't think we create design documents. So I think the answer to that is no. We do make documents.
We make notes based on meetings we have, I guess, is the most accurate way to describe it.
You basically take a lot of notes in documents. So right now, the active design document for in this wave mode, right, is basically, I think, a document that only I have written in. Everyone has access to.
And I will never read it. I just want to tell you right now. I'm probably
and that's fine.
I'm sorry.
It was actually mostly for Sam, because Sam hasn't been able to make meetings recently, so it's not for you. But yeah, I mean, it's a very... I mean, all the documents I make are pretty stream of consciousness. Like, what if we did this? What if we did this? What if we did this? And then I'm like reading it later, and I'm like, oh, I like actually really liked this idea, and I like put it at the top later, and it like doesn't actually make sense if you read it like a document as someone else. So because I know that this one is actually going to be read by Sam, I am editing it so that it's readable. Whatever. I also comment my code. It's annoying also. But
I mean,
this is like kind of a thing, but like game design documents, like it changes so much and no one reads them is really what it comes down to, right? Like, I don't expect Ben to read my stream of consciousness about like all the ideas I've had for like what score could mean in an endless wave mode in our game. And like, I only expect Sam to read that because I know Sam cares.
If we were a big team with like 60 people, I think we would have to write design documents, because what we can afford to do now is someone says like, hey, do you remember what we said we would do for blah, blah, blah? And then I'll be like, yeah, I wrote it down in my notebook. I wrote down that we said we'd do blah, blah, blah. We would do 6 of this enemy in this river or something.
Yeah, oftentimes the answer to that question is no, I don't remember. Which is the other reason that we have a lot of note-taking docs as well. It's basically like you take minutes for our meetings, right? Because sometimes our meetings go on for a long time. Sometimes they go on for 3 hours. Not our stand-ups, but like when we actually have a meeting to do, it can take 3 hours, sometimes more. Sometimes it lasts a whole week. And like, just write down what people say, what points are made. Maybe if you actually get to an endpoint, like what you decided to do, but we don't generally make design docs, which partially a feature of our size and also a feature of the game changes so constantly, and no one reads them.
I mean, something else to note is that there didn't need to be an initial design doc for Boomerang X, because the initial, I guess, plate we were working off of was this Game Jam game that already existed as a sort of touchdown reference point for where we were going to start from. So we didn't need to like write down a design doc for what is it even going to look like in its most infant stages, because we already had that. It was already built and we could look at it. And
we also have a whiteboard.
Where many other things are written down too.
So like, when sometimes we have a schedule, I say that like we don't always have a schedule. Sometimes we'll like write our schedule down, and sometimes we'll write out like, okay, like this is where we actually landed on all the levels that we're going to have. This is what all the levels are. This is what all their names are, right? Like, so that we would put in a doc somewhere that we would like pin it around to make sure everyone actually knew how to get their hands on it, or we would write it on the whiteboard, which is, because we had an office space that we were using, we could do that. But yeah, use the whiteboard a lot. And yeah, if you reach a decision on something, especially if you're like naming a bunch of things, you should write that down for sure. But don't use any like big design docs. A lot of our decisions on like mechanics, especially for upgrades and powers, were like just like playing around with stuff for like weeks and then being like, this actually feels kind of cool. I would like to see how this goes. And a lot of stuff like that. I'm like really happy with the way that all of our powers and upgrades work. They work together so well too. Oh, it's very cool.
Another thought about design docs is that I feel like a design doc is really suitable for a team that has a clear project lead, and that project lead wants to disseminate their ideas to the rest of the team. But usually the way we'll do something is one person will be like, I have an idea, and now I'm going to hash it out with everyone else, and we're all going to figure it out together. So now it's in everyone's brains. And if you're on a team of 60 people, you can't do that. But if you're on a team of 5, you can get away with doing something like that, which is kind of what we did.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of like the benefit of morning meetings. I mean, a lot of our morning meetings would be like, we would talk, we'd do our stand up, and then it would be like, hey, I wanted to talk about this. And so we'll just talk about that for the next 2 hours. And then by the end of that, we are out somewhere and we've all talked about it. And like, that has made sure that everyone knows what's going on better than if one person wrote a design document and expected everyone else to read it, because everyone was there for that conversation where it was like hatched out. Love to take any more questions. We got them.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Amanda, what is your cat's name?
This one is named Aurelia, which means golden. I had to turn my camera on because she came to crash. She loves to crash meetings.
Yeah.
Oh, you
I can't take
a meeting, Aurelia.
I
Can you
can't
hear
take
her?
credit for this one. No.
Bummer. Maybe I gotta turn my mic up. She's very loud. Apologies. I did not mean to derail. I just thought folks at work always
You've done nothing.
Folks at work always are very happy when she makes an appearance, so I thought I'd bless you all with
Thank you.
this very good girl.
I gotta say, I can't take credit for this one. This is Sam's fault. I'm pet sitting for her, or pet sitting her while Sam is out of town. So entirely Sam's fault. I had nothing to do with this. Right?
I think, Timber deserves a lot of credit for standing herself up on her own 4 legs. And I think it's unfair to say that it's all Sam's work. I think Timber's done a lot of great work in the areas of self-growth recently. I mean, look at her. She's just lounging. She's just having a great time.
It's easy for you to say. You're not cleaning up her poop.
I mean, I've lived with her.
No,
I lived with her bones.
Yeah.
Same as my roommate. Like, Dang lives in 3 houses. 2 people are paired up, and Janice lives by themselves.
Yeah. All right. So
another thing that sort of, I think, is that I guess that made it our work from home remote situation kind of unusual, because we were not all isolated. Like, I live with Sam, and Bones and Perrin live together. So if I need to talk to Sam, which is almost all the time, I knock on his door and I say, "Hey Sam, I need to talk to you right now."
And when the 3 of us needed to have a design conversation that, like, Perrin and Janice didn't care about, or if they did care about, we would just all go over to Sam and Ben's place. I mean, we did work remotely, but we were also like bubbled together, which meant that we were in walking distance of each other, so we would just walk over. We actually have another question. I get excited. I get excited when I see the Devolver logo. Any publisher or developer do that for you? Yeah, actually,
Dang.
Devolver. Dang, yeah, great.
Our logo does that for me.
Devolver has been the logo that I've looked forward to for a long time. I really like Heart Machine. I think Hyper Light Drifter was a game that like I played I played in college and I was like, you know what? Yeah, I do want to make indie games. Like this Hyper Light Drifter was really a huge inspiration point for me, especially actually seeing it run at AGDQ. And what they did was the runners called the developers like while it was going on. This is a phone. They called the developers while it was going and like actually talked to them while it was happening. And when I saw that happen, I was like, that is what I want. Like that's where I want to be. That's like what I want to happen. And that was when I told that to Sam, that's when he made the joke about making a GDQ bait. I mean, here we are. I mean, it might actually be, I'm sure it's going to be submitted for AGDQ, but we'll see if it actually gets
Well,
selected.
there was another part to this question of have time to game during development. Played a lot of Star Wars Battlefront.
Oh yeah.
I can't even remember. Did I finish games? Oh yeah, I finished Kentucky Route Zero while we were doing this. Awesome game. Very strongly recommend that one.
Just kind of anything to get away from it on the weekends. So definitely.
Can I guess? Can I guess what you played, Bones?
Not if you're gonna guess what you think. I think you're gonna guess.
Do you think I'm gonna say League of Legends?
Yes.
I'm not gonna say League of Legends.
Okay.
And now you'll never know if I wasn't gonna say it because I wasn't or because you said that.
All right.
I was gonna ask Dota 2 and Binding of Isaac.
Bad guesses. Sorry. Wrong. I've been playing a lot of Slay the Spire recently. Which, card game, nerd, fair enough. I also played Kentucky Route Zero, also played Outer Wilds, also played Disco Elysium. I know it's kind of a trope to recommend all three of those games at this point. But, it's fine. I still do. I still recommend all those. They're all very good. One of the perks that no one tells you about being published by Devolver is we have access to every Devolver game for free. So we got all of Devolver's back catalog. And so for no intelligent reason, I've been going through it alphabetically. Which is like the worst idea I thought. It's like the worst possible idea I could have. But I've been doing it. And I'm on the letter E. I did not get very far, but they also have a lot of games. So that's other stuff I've been playing.
What Devolver games start with an E? I'm trying to think.
Enter the Gungeon.
Oh, that's a good one. Enter the Gungeon.
Have you played it? It's a roguelike.
No, okay. I have never played a Devolver game in my entire life, except for ours. That's the only Devolver game I think I've ever played.
Really?
Obviously,
you didn't play Hotline Miami?
Didn't play Hotline Miami. Didn't play Gris.
You should actually play Hotline Miami. It Drive was a huge inspiration for it, and I know how much you like Drive.
All right, cool.
So you should play Hotline Miami.
All right, I'll give it a go. I know they did the Serious Sam games. I know they did our game. I know they did Boomerang X.
Devolver did Loop Hero, which I played when it came out. I didn't have any special access to that at the time, so I just played the demo. But when it was a demo, their demo went live on the same festival that ours did. And that's when Loop Hero really went viral and took off. And it was sad being like, I want that, but also I was really happy for them at the same time. But yeah. Good old Loop Hero. Gosh, another card game. Dang it. I'm outing myself.
So it looks like that may have been the last question,
I think the talk was
Yeah.
over, like, officially when I recommended you play Hotline Miami. No one wants to listen to that conversation.
Yeah, no one cares anymore. Now,
No one cares
let's
about
just talk
that.
about whatever we want to. You know what? I played The Last Guardian again while we were working on this. Great game. Awesome game. Not enough people played The Last Guardian. Those are all my thoughts on it. I ran out of things to say.
Well, they also, completely non-game related subject. They repaved the trail, the bike trail from Troy to Albany, and we have been roller skating it a lot. So strongly recommend people go try it out. It's freshly paved. It's smooth. Great time. Get in there.
I don't think we repaved the section near me then.
Well, get on that.
Because I go biking on that pretty often.
Yeah. They did.
Okay, you specifically shouldn't do that then.
Yeah.
Leave other people.
Yeah, let everyone else do it.
Oh, this is Ollie talking. Yes, you should. Anyone who's interested, it's like butter spoon. It's so beautiful now.
It's great.
I was gonna do it today, but I remember. I mean, how could I have forgotten? We had to give our IGDA talk tonight.
Yeah, we didn't.
So I was not planning on doing something else tonight at all.
Right. We knew the whole time.
That's tomorrow night's plan. Tomorrow's night's plan is to skate the Empire State Trail.
Hey, there he is.
What's up? I'm doing work.
Yeah.
Yay! We love working at night and past work hours. It's fun.
All right. Well, I think this has concluded the end of our talk. I'm sure it'll be cut way earlier than this on YouTube. But here we are. Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking us to do this.